Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In today's video we're gonna be talking about how to use the report procedure, which is gonna help us to create reports in SAS. So let's get started. Alright, so we can say the report procedure will help us to create two types of reports. One is considered a detailed report and the other one is the summary report. So basically a detailed report is just gonna show us a table in a report format, and it's gonna show us every observation. Every row will be an observation, while the summary report instead will give us a summary of our data, and it will it will give us the groupings of our data, and so we can calculate different statistics for the analysis variables and all of that. So let's take a look at okay, so before we dive into the syntax and the code on the procedure, we first need to understand some basic themes about how the report procedure was created. So basically we need to define the variables that we're gonna use among 6 different types, and the different types that we're gonna define will define if the report will be detailed report or summary report. So as you can see, the display and other usage, it will create a detailed report. Group and across usage will be a summary report, and analysis and computing can be for both. But don't worry if you don't understand what I'm saying right now. We're gonna get into the details and we're gonna do a lot of examples. So the displays usage. As you can see, the displays usage basically will display the rows as it is in the table. So basically it's not summarizing at all. So it is just displaying the variables as they are. So nothing to say here. In the order usage, basically will order the variables, and the report will suppress the values for the variables and trying to delete redundancy. So, and it will kind of be ordered by descending or ascending, of course. All right, and now we have the group usage. It will help us to create summary reports, which are actually more interesting than the detailed reports. So group usage will basically summarize our data by certain variables, the variables that we classified as group, and then we can calculate with the analysis variables, we can calculate different statistics for those variables. Now the across usage is the one that will help us to kind of transpose our data. It will transpose the variable from, it will create different columns for the different values that the across variable has. Perfect. And now we have the analysis usage, which can be used in both detail and summary reports. So for the group summary report that we see in the left, so we are using the invoice variable, and we're the statistic that SAS is returning by default. It will be the sum, but we can ask for many different statistics. Now, in case of the detailed report, well, SAS will calculate the statistic based on just one observation. So basically, it wouldn't change if we ask for the other statistic, because we're not considering many observations, but just one. Now we have the computed usage. This is a variable that is not in the input data set. It's just a variable that we're creating in the report based on other columns that we have in the report. So for example, the variable that you see highlighted here was created based on 2 different variables that are in this report and not in the input data set. All right. So now that we have seen the different type of usages that we can use, now let's get more into the syntax of the report. So this is just a partial syntax of the report. We start with the keyword PROC report. We specify our input data set. So the no WD stands for no window, and it is because in the beginning this report used to pop up a window where we would create the report interactively and not through code. So we just put it like that, so we can tell SAS we're gonna write the code. And so the more important statements are the column statements, which basically is where we have to specify the different items in our report. So what is an item? An item can be considered a variable, or can be considered a computed variable or a statistic. So the column will control the order of the items in the report. Now, in the defined statements are actually just to, so we're gonna use a defined statement for each item that we want to use in the report, and it's basically, it will help us to customize how we want to work with this variable in the report. And so we can specify the usage, and we can specify options. So the idea is that there's a defined statement for each item in the report. All right, perfect. So now we're ready to dive into the code. All right, now let's get to the fun part where we're gonna start writing the code. So the first thing we're gonna do is write the PROC report keyword and specify the dataset that we want to work. So let's just run this to see what the default output would be. All right, so let's take a look at the report and the data that we're gonna work with. So basically, the order of the variables will be the same as the ones the order of the input dataset, and the order of the observations will also not change. And so SAS is using by default the labels in the variables, and is also keeping the same format and maintaining the format. And now if you see, the character variables will be aligned to the left, while the numeric variables will be aligned to the right. So now, as I said before, we're gonna use the no window option always, so to try to keep it compatible with other SAS versions. Now for this example, we're not gonna work with all these observations. We're just gonna work with a subset, and we're gonna start with the Chevrolet observations. For that, we're gonna use the where statement, which is a statement that we can use in most of the SAS procedures. So we're just gonna run this, and we're gonna see the observations. All right. Now the second thing we're gonna do is explain how to use the column statement. So as I said, the column statement specifies the order of the items that we're gonna use in the report. So for this case, we're just gonna use these 5 variables, and now SAS will just show us the report with these 5 variables. Now, since this is a report procedure, the idea is that it helps us to customize the report as we want. So in case we want to add a title to these variables, the only thing we need to do is, in parentheses, we're gonna put in parentheses the variables that we're gonna put a title, and then we specify the title between single or double quotes like this, and then we're gonna have the title. In case we want to specify titles to more specific variables, then we just need to group those, enclose those variables in parentheses as we're doing it right now, and then we're gonna specify the title like this, and then we run the procedure, and then we have the titles added to the report. All right, this is just for you to know that you have flexibility. But now we're gonna just work with a very simple report to start showing the way how we can use this procedure. All right, so now we saw how to use the column statement, which will define the order of the variable that we will use in our report. So let's just run this one. So we're gonna start using these 2 variables. Now the idea is, like, every item in the column statement will have a defined statement. So basically, let's do that just to explain that. Now SAS is, since, as you can see, we just ran that report without the defined statements, and that worked because SAS is using some default options. So basically, for the character variables, like the make variable, SAS is using is taking that variable as the usage display. So but it's better to specify it explicitly. So to do that, we just use this /, and then we're gonna specify the usage. In this case, it would be display. So for the invoice, since it is a numeric variable, SAS by default will take it as an analysis variable. So let's just do that, and it will return the sum for that variable. So nothing changed because that's the default parameters. So but the idea is, like, you having each item with a defined statement will allow you to customize every single piece of the report. So let's say for display, we want to change the label that we want to show. In this case, we're just putting the same label, just in capital letters. And let's say for some, we also want another label, or we want to change the format. So we just use a format statement, and we specify the format. So let's just say we want $10 with 2 decimal places, like that. So all right, now you get an idea that you will be able to change almost a lot of themes in this for every single item. So format can be specified also with the alias f, and it will run exactly the same. All right, now we have just seen how to work with the display and analysis usage. Now let's introduce how to use the other usage. So for that, we're just gonna use another variable, which is type. So let's just define type. So by default, SAS is gonna take it as display because it's a character variable. But let's say we want to use the other variable. All right. So the other variable, of course, it will order the variables. In this case, for make, since we just have one value, it will not show, it will not change much. It will just suppress the values and for not repeating the same value for every single observation. But if we use order for the type variable, then we're gonna have this report, and by default SAS is ordering them ascending. So if we just want to change it for descending, so it's as simple as just specifying descending, but with the right spelling. Sorry about that. Now the order, SAS is taking it descending based on the formatted value. Basically, if this type variable had this format, like wagon was a format and not the real number that SAS is storing in the background. So if we want to order that based on the what SAS has in the background, we have to specify the order option, which is actually different from the order usage. So the order option by default is taken as formatted. All right, but in case we want to change it as the internal value, so we just need to change it like internal and it will change. But in this case, it doesn't apply to this scenario. All right, now let's take a look at how we can create summary reports. So we just saw how to use the order and display type of usages. So for that, we're gonna use another example. Okay, so let's start with this report. So this is a detailed report. So let's say instead we want to use the group usage. As you can see, SAS will also suppress the values when they are repeated. And SAS also will order them as an ascending order. All right, so in this case, it looks like if it was a detailed report also, because the type variables is in displayed mode. So if we wanted to group, then SAS by default then will group it. And for the analysis variables, in this case invoice, SAS will return the sum, but we can just change it for any other statistic as we want. Now, for you to get an idea of the different statistics that you can ask to this procedure, you have the list in this table. So as you can see, you can ask for a wide variety of statistics. So that's just for you to get an idea. All right, so one more important thing to mention here is the way SAS is treating the missing values. So by default, in this report is not considering any missing values. So it's excluding those observations with missing values. So I'm not agree that would be that should be the default way to behave. So, but that's how it is. So now, if we want to consider the missing values, we just need to put the missing option in the PROC report statement. So this missing value will basically, for every variable that we will using, we'll consider the missing values. But in case we just want to apply this option just to a specific variable, we just need to remove it from the PROC report keyword and specify it in the define statement for each of the variables that we want to apply it to. So now we will consider that. Other interesting option is in case we want to keep the same structure for the report, in case, for example, now if you see the type variable for Asia that just have 3 different types, but for Europe it has 4. So now let's say if we want to show for Asia the 4 different types, even if there are some that doesn't apply, so we can use the complete rows option. So we just put it like this, and SAS will keep the same structure and it will put missing values for those who don't have any observations for this value. Well, this option I normally use it more when we want to keep the same structure and we don't want to every month that we run the report to change based on the values that appeared in that month. Now let's take a look at how we can use the statistics. So by default, SAS, every numeric variable, it will treat it as an analysis variable and it will calculate the sum. So, but there are other statistics, of course. And now, in case we want to, for example, show the count of the observations, we just need to use the end keyword in the column statement as an statistic, and then we can define it end, and we can basically give a label, so like this. Now it is just giving us the counts of the observations that it considered in this for each row. Now there's another statistic like the percent end, so it will just give us the percent. So I also, even though it is not mandatory to put the define statement for every item, I always recommend it because it will help us have a view of everything that we're doing and not just letting SAS do a lot of things by default. Perfect. So that's how we can use the end and percent. So the end and percent statistics are the only ones that can go in the column statement all by themselves. In case we want to use, for example, for this invoice, we're using the sum. Then as you can see in the invoice, we're asking SAS to return the sum, but in case we want also not just the sum but also other statistic for the same variable, so the things like we cannot define other invoice variable with a different statistic here, we can just specify it once. So basically the way to do it is to use the comma operator, and inside the comma we can ask for the different statistics that we want, let's say sum and mean, and then SAS, we can just go here and define mean for this case, and well, just give it an alias if we want. So in this case, SAS will know that this mean will come from the mean from invoice. So if we run this, we will get this report. So to keep it consistent, we can just use also the sum, and then like this. Now let's say for some reason we want to work with not just the invoice as the analysis variables, but with other analysis variables. So let's say we also want to work with weight, and if we want to also ask for some statistics like mean or max, I don't know. So the things like this mean definition will also apply to every mean item that is in this column statement. So in case we want to give a different label for this mean column, so SAS will just give the same attributes. So we can just add an alias. For example, we can give an alias for those items, and then we can define them here, and then give the proper attributes that we want for them. So like this, it will work. All right, now you get an idea how you can work with the different statistics and how to change and give them specific properties. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how we can create summary reports, but not just using the group usage, but also the across usage. So let's start with this simple report. Let's just run it. So as you can see, this would be a detailed report. We are not specifying the type of usage. So basically we're gonna use the across usage, and what SAS will do is for each different value of this variable, it will create a different column, and it will give us the counts of the number of times that value appears on the table. So basically we'll have this result. Now let's say we want to add another variable. Let's say we want to add origin. So the idea is that the define statement, even though they define order, doesn't have to be the same as this one, because this is the order that SAS will use to show the report, but I always try to keep it consistent, so it's easy to read. All right, so now we have this report using the origin as group. But as you can see, SAS is just returning the counts of observations for each of the different values, but the idea is to show not just the counts, but also get statistics based on an analysis variable. So if we want to use, for example, invoice as the analysis variable, and we want to show, for example, the mean, so now we can just basically we need to tell SAS that we want to use the invoice for type. So basically the way to do it is using the comma operator, and in parentheses specifying the variable, the analysis variables, and so it will work like this. Now we can ask for the different statistics that we want. So just for you to understand, this is basically stacking this variable to this type variable. Now in case we want to stack on other variables, we just need to specify them here. So for example, we want cylinders to be another variable. Well, so we have cylinders. By default, SAS will return the sum, but if we want, for example, the max, then it's just a matter of specifying it here. All right, now you get an idea how you can use the across usage. Now let's go to the last type of usage, which is the computed variable. So let's take a look at this example. All right, so let's just run this. So as you can see, this is a detailed report. Now let's say we want to create a computed variable, a calculated variable based on this invoice variable, and let's say we want another variable that tell us the 10% of this variable. So this will be a calculated variable. Now the things like for every item that will appear in this report, you need to put it in the column statement. So this would be another variable. Let's say we want to name it discount. So discount, we also have to put it in the defined statement so we can tell SAS how to treat this variable, and this would be a computed variable. And now we'll have to give SAS the details of how we want to calculate this variable, like the formula. So basically we just use a compute block. We just say, okay, compute discount. We have to close this block with ncomp, and then we just need to give the formula here. Now let's say we want to use the invoice and the sum of that invoice, and we're gonna multiply it by 0.1 to get the 10%. So now you'll see here the 10% of that variable. Now this type of syntax is called compound name. Basically we can specify this different statistic, but this statistic is taken from this variable. So if we want to ask for another statistic like this, it will not work, because then SAS will not know how to get them in. But if we put them in here, so now SAS will understand that. All right, so let's give a format for this variable. Let's give it the dollar format. So you now get an idea of how to calculate a computed variable. So the computed variable will not only work in a detailed report, but also in a summary report. So let's say we want to give the group, treat these variables as groups. So like this. Okay, but let's not use model because it has too many different observations. Let's just type. But we forgot to change type in the column statement. Perfect. So now you have the discount variable calculated using a summary report. Now let's take a look at how we can use a calculated variable, but not using the group usage, but also the across usage. So let's take a look at this example. So let's just run it. So here, as you can see, I'm also giving an alias to this invoice variable, so we can give not just get them in, but also the count. So that is how we're getting this report. So, but before we calculate the new variable, I want you to take a look at the dataset that SAS is using in the background to create this report. So we can just display that using the out equal option, and then we're gonna use give a name to that dataset, and we're gonna display it with a proc print. Okay, so I by mistake put it reports. Sorry about that. Now we have the table that SAS is using to create this report here. As you can see, we're using the type variable is in this with the same name, but this variable that we use as a cross, SAS is using giving them other names. So basically, to create the calculated field that we want to create, we need to reference them, create them using these names instead of these names. Okay, so now that you know that, now let's say we want to calculate a field that will be the difference between this average and this other average. So let's first reference it in the column statement, and now in the define statement. So this will be a computed variable, and then again let's compute that average diff, and let's give it the formula, which would be the difference, for example, of this column minus C4, and we're gonna run it. And now, as you can see here, SAS is creating this calculated field based on this subtracting 33,000 over 40,000, that would be minus 7,000. All right, perfect. So let's just finish it, giving it a proper format. All right, so now just to wrap up this video, I'm gonna explain to you how to get a summary line at the end of our report. So let's just take a look at this example. So let's say we want to get a line that summarizes all these analysis variables. So to do that, we just need to use the break statement. Basically, it will break the report at some point. In this case, we're gonna break it after all the report, and then after we can specify we want a summary. So we will get a summary. So we can also have this information in the beginning, just changing it after to before. And let's say in case we want, let's just put in the way we had it. Now let's say instead of having a summary line at the end, we want a summary line like this for every single, whenever SAS changes the value of this origin value. So basically we can just use the break statement, and we can say after the origin, after the value of origin changes, give us a summary line. So I will give it like that. Of course, we can ask it to be before, like this. All right, guys. So I hope this video was useful for you to get an idea of everything you can do with PROC report. There are indeed a lot of things, more things that we can do with this report, but just to keep this video short, I just wanted you to get an idea how to use it, and so you can keep on searching more on the different options that you have available for this report. All right, so once again, I hope this video was useful for you, and thank you very much for your time. Please don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in another opportunity. Thank you.